Michael, thank you so much for joining me about
Hey,
this
thanks so much for having me.
conversation with NFTs. I'm looking forward to learning about Consensus Mesh. Can you please introduce yourself to me and tell me a bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everybody. So Mike Kriak, managing operating partner at Consensus Mesh. We focus on the acceleration, incubation, and investment of Web3. We've spent a considerable amount of time, I think, as most folks know, within Consensus on building that larger constellation of how we can realize the value of Web3. Been at Consensus for about 3.5 years. And prior to that, I was the chief operating officer at Mashable. So certainly know firsthand the challenges that creators and consumers alike face in relation to where value sits and where value accrues. It obviously should be with them and not the platforms. This is why I'm so excited about what is happening within DAOs and specifically what's happening with NFTs.
Well, Mashable, as a centralized publication, did a great job building community. It was one of the things that Mashable and TechCrunch did differently than, and your peers, differently than so many of the previous publishers and journalist type platforms. This is totally different, the Web3 environment. Community is not a good idea. Community is an expectation. Can you talk a bit about your view on community development and cultivation for what you and your team are working on and for those that you're involved with and partnered with?
Yeah, I think the largest question or the largest shift that happens is how individuals, collectively, the community, participate, how they see value, how they determine the future of the platforms and the communities that they create. That decentralized future is the fundamental difference between Web 2 and Web 3. I got to see firsthand the large rise, 100 million monthly active uniques on Mashable across multiple platforms. But the platforms owned that data, they owned the relationships, they had the ability to change and determine ultimately what was created. And that's what we're looking to change. Our focus is more broad than media and entertainment, but we're very excited to see how communities are formed now in relation to DAOs and very excited to be able to pull them together across a wide array of projects and initiatives. Very happy to go into those.
Yeah, why don't you go into that a bit more? I just want to
Yeah,
learn about you and your thoughts on stuff. So if you have things to share, you have my
let,
attention.
let's do it. Yeah, I'd say, I'm fortunate enough to have worked and continue to work with the Gitcoin team that was initially incubated at Consensus. I'm on the board now. And I would encourage everybody to look at how deeply Gitcoin has natively produced engagement through the GTC token from a governance perspective on core votes that help build that decentralized protocol. As you know, Gitcoin acts as a meeting place or a marketplace for the ways in which open source software developers and designers are funded. How do they find that funding? That happens initially through grants and hackathons, but it extends itself now into the future that will ultimately lead to reputation and identity. I think Gitcoin does a tremendous job in terms of how a DAO is built. I actually know for a fact that they are continuing to look at how that happens and how that's transformed. So if you want a great way to see how a DAO actually operates, would definitely encourage that. They launched Moonshot Bots, which was a first NFT to service and public goods and to be able to fund public goods and developers if you got a chance to see that. So check that out. This continues with Decrypt, one of the projects that we work on right now that last summer had their first initial discussion and iteration as Gitcoin DAO, utilizing a token mechanism to engage with audiences on what stories they wanted to hear about, using their tokens to vote on those types of stories. So the utility and the governance that's happening in those two examples are amazing. Very excited finally to discuss a handful of DAOs that we in the Mesh and my colleagues actively participate in. Dark Horse DAO, which is a pooled investment DAO that is seeking to and continues to develop the Zed-Run NFTs and the Zed-Run initiative. There's also Fingerprints DAO, which is a more traditional art collector DAO, and a handful of others that are coming down the pike. We're obviously very proud of Tribute Labs that was incubated within Consensus that was really started the Lao and Flamingo and Neptune and others. So there are many initiatives, particularly around pooled investment DAOs on NFTs, but as well as folks like Decrypt and Gitcoin that are really leading the way in which the interplay exists on how best to utilize a DAO structure to be able to grow the creator economy.
You have a unique view in that you're working with a bunch of professional teams that are having success because they're brilliant and because they have a great ecosystem around them. And so you have a view where there's a lot of success, maybe more accelerated than maybe some other camps. So let me ask you about technology this way. Would you say that Web3 tech is in the first, second, third trimester and not yet stillborn? Or would you say it's an infant, a couple months old? I mean, certainly it's not an adolescent. It's not even really like crawling yet, in my opinion. But where do you think the tech is at today, if you had to say, compare it to a human life?
I think we're just in the essential like pre-building blocks. We need to do a better job of coordinating and collaborating, and that tooling is absolutely essential. We're very proud of our Tachyon teams and initiatives in the acceleration of that to that end. Continuing to incubate DAO tooling, we have to do better than being simply able to anon or pseudo-anon scream at each other on a Discord for how DAOs and NFT projects are going to collaborate and succeed. There are better mechanisms that are coming. So I would say it's, and I would actually draw the analogy to, a package of Legos. I think a lot of the pieces are there. We still need to buy a couple more sets, and we haven't certainly put the project together yet. So the pieces are just formed. We've got a little bit of the instructions, but we like to free play. So I think we don't quite know how it's going to turn out yet. But there's a lot of great essential building blocks that have begun.
If I say NFT 2024 to you, is there anything that you're projecting and hoping for in the next couple of years that maybe you think is unique to you? Something that you're like, I really hope in, next 30 months, this is happening. Anything that you're building towards or hoping for in that regard?
Yeah, I'd say there are kind of two fundamental elements, and I think that will continue to branch and develop. I think the first of which is, looking at projects like Bored Ape and others that are really understanding what brand means in relation to entertainment. And that is super exciting to figure out, that you start with the essential community that deems something valuable and wants to be playful and iterative on that front. I think that is one of the, entertainment or Hollywood approaches. The second, love what Altered State Machine is doing, ASM, in relation to AI NFTs, particularly within gaming. Yeah. And I think that you've got a really interesting scenario where you as an individual, as a player, will be able to determine and play alongside algorithms that will then mimic your play, so that you're actually able to infuse those into NFTs that will kind of move away from quote unquote dumb avatars. I mean, it's one thing to have your PFP NFT as a 3D rendered in Decentraland or Sandbox. It's another thing for it to actually act and feel like you. Yeah. So I think more AI that exists within there. The third of which is just the basic fundamental nuts and bolts of rights management and royalty management. There are many exciting initiatives that are tying and using zero knowledge to help ensure that the legacy or the iterations that happen from a single creation NFT is moved down further into subsequent works, and that the rights and royalties are paid respectfully and appropriately to the individuals that started to create that. That will come in part through 2981 perhaps, or for other mechanisms, multi-chain bridges, layer twos that will be able to interoperate together in a way that enables the NFTs to move freely, but then also to have the rights and economic rights follow along with the creators. Those are kind of three short buckets that I think about. Entertainment, gaming, somewhat similar, but really focuses on the metaverse. And then that component of the actual components of just realizing the value that we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be focusing on the creators and their rights. So we need to do a better job on different standards than 721. which was amazing, of course. So those are kind of three areas that I'm hopeful. If I had a fourth, I would actually think more, very excited to see what's happening in relation to liquidity and fractional ownership. Mention Paradigm as well. They're working on a couple of things called RICs, which is a way in which to fractionalize and reconstitute fractional ownership of NFTs that really enables a broader array of options on the financial side of value that's being created in these NFTs. So you got a little bit, I think, for everybody there in those four examples.
Well, I think our conversation right now, you shared a ton. Like you had a good pace and a good method by which you communicate, but there's a lot of content there. I imagine there's going to be people that will watch this a couple of times to try to absorb all the things you shared. So thanks for coming in and educating me and letting the folks that are coming to NFT NYC get to know more about you and Consensus Mesh. For anybody watching us live or that sees the archive, thank you for your attention. My name is Ian Utilli. I'm one of the co-producers of NFT NYC, and I'll be back again with another one of these conversations very soon. Michael, thank you for joining me. I'll see you in New York.